Watch two people in a high-pressure situation, and you'll see something remarkable. One person is trying desperately to control the situation. They're giving orders. They're raising their voice. They're trying to dominate through force of personality and will. They're making things happen through sheer force of effort. And everyone around them is stressed. Everyone is defensive. Everyone is looking for an escape. But then watch someone else in the same situation. This person seems almost relaxed. They're breathing normally. They're thinking clearly. They're not raising their voice. They're not forcing anything. And somehow, without any apparent effort, things are moving in the direction they want them to move. People are following them. People are trusting them. People are organizing around them. So what is the difference between the person desperately grasping for power and the person who seems to have it effortlessly? And why is it that the person with the most actual power is often the one who seems like they're trying the least? The answer reveals something fundamental about power that most people spend their entire lives not understanding. The power to control others is built on the foundation of the power to control yourself. And the person who is desperately trying to control a situation is broadcasting a very specific thing. They cannot control themselves. They cannot manage their own emotions. They cannot manage their own impulses. They cannot sit with discomfort without reacting. They're not in control, they're in reaction. And when others sense that you're reactive, when they sense that you cannot manage your own internal state, they do not trust you with anything. They do not follow you. They do not respect you. They organize away from you. But the person who can sit calmly in chaos, who can manage their own nervous system in the face of pressure, who can keep their emotions regulated when everything around them is falling apart, is broadcasting something completely different. They're broadcasting, I am in control of myself. My internal state is not dependent on external circumstances. I can handle pressure. I can make decisions from a place of calm clarity rather than from a place of reactivity. And when others sense this, when they sense that you are genuinely in control of yourself, they will follow you. They will trust you. They will organize around you because they sense that following you is safe, that you won't make decisions from fear or anger, that you'll make decisions from actual strategic thinking. Think about what's actually happening at a nervous system level in these two scenarios. The person desperate to control the situation is in fight or flight. Their amygdala is activated. They're in survival mode. And survival mode is not where good decisions come from. Survival mode is where reactive decisions come from. The person who seems calm is operating from a completely different place. Their prefrontal cortex is engaged. They're thinking strategically. They're not in survival mode, they're in creation mode. And the difference between these two nervous system states is the difference between someone with actual power and someone just flailing. Here's what's crucial to understand. The power to control others does not come from being able to force them or manipulate them or dominate them. Those are temporary. Those are fragile. The real power comes from people choosing to follow you because they trust that you have their best interests in mind and that you can think clearly enough to actually protect those interests. And people only believe those things about someone who has obviously demonstrated the ability to control themselves. Let's look at how this actually manifests in specific contexts. In a workplace, when there's a crisis, the person who stays calm and thinks strategically ends up with more power and influence than the person who panics. The panicked person, even if they're in an official leadership position, loses authority. People stop following them. People stop trusting them. But the calm person, even if they're not in an official position, gains authority. People start looking to them. People start following their lead. Why? Because calmness signals control, and control signals competence. This is also why some of the most powerful people, the ones who hold the most authority, are the ones who seem almost serene. They're not visibly stressed. They're not obviously worried. They're not reacting to every provocation or every setback. They're operating from a place of internal order. And that internal order is what creates external power. The person visibly struggling, visibly stressed, visibly emotional is broadcasting that they're not in control. And people don't want to be led by someone who's not in control. Think about what happens to your nervous system when you're around someone who is obviously controlling themselves. You feel safe. You feel like you can relax. You don't have to worry about them making impulsive decisions. You don't have to worry about them exploding or falling apart. There's a stability to their presence, and that stability is magnetic. People want to be around stable people. People want to be led by stable people. People want to trust their lives to stable people. Now, contrast this with what happens when you're around someone who is obviously not controlling themselves. Your nervous system tenses up. You're waiting for the outburst. You're preparing for the irrational decision. You're anticipating the emotional reaction. You're in a state of vigilance. And no one wants to be around that. No one wants to follow that. This is the first and most fundamental principle of power. The power to influence others is built on the foundation of the power to manage your own nervous system. If you cannot regulate your own emotions, if you cannot stay calm under pressure, if you cannot think clearly when things are difficult, then you have no power over anyone else. You might have a title. You might have an official position, but you don't have actual power. Actual power comes from demonstrated self-control. Here's something worth understanding about the relationship between self-control and respect. People respect people who have demonstrated the ability to manage themselves. They respect people who don't react impulsively. They respect people who think before they speak. They respect people who stay calm under pressure. They do not respect people who are slaves to their own impulses. They do not respect people who explode at the slightest provocation. They do not respect people who make decisions based on emotion rather than on strategy. Think about the people you actually respect in your life. I would wager that almost all of them are people who have demonstrated remarkable self-control. They're people who don't seem to be slaves to their emotions. They're people who seem to be in charge of themselves. And that sense that they're in charge of themselves is what makes you respect them and want to follow them. This also explains why some of the most powerful people are relatively quiet. They're not constantly expressing every emotion they feel. They're not venting every frustration. They're not broadcasting their inner state to everyone around them. They're managing their own nervous system. They're keeping their own emotional state regulated. And that regulation, that self-discipline, is what creates power. The second principle of power through self-control is consistency. When you demonstrate the ability to control yourself, when you show that you can manage your emotions and your impulses, you become predictable in a positive way. People know what to expect from you. People know you won't explode at them. People know you won't make reckless decisions. People know they can count on you. And predictability in a positive form creates trust, and trust creates power. Compare this to someone who is emotionally reactive. That person is unpredictable. You don't know when they'll explode. You don't know when they'll make a rash decision. You don't know what version of them you're going to get on any given day. That unpredictability is exhausting. People don't trust unpredictability. People don't want to be around unpredictability. They certainly don't want to be led by it. Think about what it feels like to work with someone who is emotionally stable versus someone who is emotionally volatile. With the stable person, you can relax. You can focus on the work. You can trust that they'll make decisions based on strategy rather than emotion. With the volatile person, you're constantly managing their emotions. You're constantly monitoring their mood. You're constantly worried about setting them off. That's exhausting. And people will leave that situation as soon as they can. The third principle is that self-control creates freedom. This seems counterintuitive, but it's true. The person who is controlled by their emotions, who is reactive, who is impulsive, is actually enslaved. They're not free. They're reacting to every provocation. They're being jerked around by their own emotions. But the person who has mastered their emotions, who can choose their response, who can stay calm, is actually free. They can choose how to respond. They can choose to engage or disengage. They can choose strategy over reaction. And that freedom, that ability to choose, is power. Think about it this way. If someone can trigger you, if they can make you react, if they can get an emotional response from you, then they have power over you. They've learned your buttons. They can push them anytime they want. But if you're unflappable, if you cannot be triggered, if you respond to everything from a place of calm choice rather than from reactive emotion, then no one has that power over you. You've made yourself unreachable to manipulation through emotion. Here's something that's worth understanding about the relationship between power and self-control in specific domains. In negotiation, the person who stays calm while the other person gets emotional has massive advantage. The emotional person is making bad decisions. The calm person is thinking clearly. In conflict, the person who doesn't escalate while the other person escalates has advantage. The escalating person is losing control. The calm person is staying in control. In leadership, the person who can stay calm during crisis while others are panicking has massive influence. The panicking people are looking to the calm person for direction. This is also why some of the most dangerous people, the ones with the most power, are the ones who seem almost gentle. They're not visibly angry. They're not obviously upset. But that's not because they're not taking things seriously. It's because they're so in control of themselves that they don't need to express their emotions to communicate their power. They can accomplish what they want from a place of perfect calm. And that calm, that control, that refusal to be reactive is what makes them powerful. Think about what this means for how you actually move through your world. Every time you react emotionally, every time you let someone get a rise out of you, every time you explode or become visibly upset, you're demonstrating a lack of control. You're showing people that they can affect you. You're showing people that your emotional state is vulnerable to their behavior. And that vulnerability makes you less powerful, not more. But every time you stay calm, every time you respond strategically rather than reactively, every time you manage your own nervous system in the face of provocation, you're demonstrating control. You're showing people that they cannot affect you. You're showing people that you're in charge of your own emotional state. And that control is what creates power. This is also why discipline, in the traditional sense, is actually power. The ability to delay gratification, the ability to do what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like doing it, the ability to stay committed to a path, even when it's difficult, the ability to manage your impulses and your desires. These are all forms of self-control, and self-control is power. The person who can discipline themselves is the person who will end up with actual power. The person who is controlled by their desires, who cannot delay gratification, who must satisfy every impulse immediately, will not have power. They'll be enslaved to their desires. The closing paradox that should sit with you is profound. Power is not something you grasp. Power is something that flows toward you when you've demonstrated that you can control yourself. The more desperately you reach for power, the more you drive it away, because grasping is reactive and desperation is reactive, and reactivity signals lack of control. But the more you focus on controlling yourself, the more you focus on managing your own nervous system, the more you focus on staying calm and strategic, the more power flows toward you. Not because you're trying to grab it, but because people trust and follow people who are in control of themselves. So here's what should follow you. In what situations are you currently reacting rather than responding? Where are you letting your emotions control your behavior instead of controlling your emotions? And what would change if you shifted your focus from trying to control others to actually controlling yourself?